Lama Lodro, speaking tonight about the challenges that the human condition faces in our world as far as the delusions that we come up against, our sort of misconceptions about what we are, what this universe might be, what this life experience is. How does a spiritual faith like Buddhism offer something to a modern world that's facing these environmental crises and this sort of disconnection between ourselves and the rest of creation? Do you see Buddhism serving a really sort of key role in helping human consciousness adapt to the crises that we're facing?
The early Theravada teaching, called main trunk teaching, that's in Sri Lanka, Burma, Thailand, Laos, and Cambodia, won't address those problems. It's built into the actual Vinaya, or the rules of the order, that there will be no interaction with politics in any way. And it's strictly designed for people that leave the world and want to do inner work. And that's well and good. So we're not going to get any help from that group. There might be occasionally a radical bhikkhu who steps forward and makes an ecological statement. But they would be considered it would be very, very bad form. Okay. But recently now the Mahayana is different, because the Mahayana now is working with this interchange between the inner and the outer. And the idea of compassion allows the Mahayana teachings, and that would say embodied in the Dalai Lama, to take action on these issues. And I believe that the Dalai Lama has, within the last 2 weeks, come out very strongly saying that we need to take a look at our actions and do something. Spiritual beings need to actually get off their butt and take action to do something. It's time to do something. We've gone too far, and the environment is too damaged to not actually stand up and do something. If you have compassion and you are clear, you do something. If you're not clear, well, then you're going to have to get clear first in order to be effective at doing something. So if you want to look at it in developmentally, the Theravada is getting clear. The Mahayana is already clear, and now they're doing compassionate actions.
Yes.
I mean, as far as that, they don't have science, they're have logical analysis. They have philosophies. They have great systems of mental cultivation, and the idea of our religious leaders actually standing up and saying it's time to do something, I think, is really important. It isn't going to happen from the Theravada view. From the Theravadins, I know that it should happen from the Catholic Church, though. There's no reason why they can't do that. They have no injunctions against that.
Mm-hmm. So the sort of focus on personal cultivation for personal liberation, which can be the focus of a lot of the paths, so to speak, you think that there is room in there for us to start embracing this, even though it's a transient world, that if we're functioning from a place of compassion, that we're embracing this transient world, and that we're acting towards it, rather than denouncing it and sort of transcending it.
That's very much a Theravada view. Is to they would consider a world that's written, that's not making it up. They would consider it a cesspool, a dart, a poison, and that you would do everything you could to possibly get out of it and not return. And they give an example of a man who was walking down a road in India. They had cesspools that were large open pits, and it's monsoons, and he slips and slides down into the septic system where all the feces are and garbage and dead carcasses are thrown in there, and he can't get out because it's muddy. And a man comes by from the village with a pole and gives it to him, and he pulls himself out, and they take him into town, and they take his clothes and they throw him away, and he takes a shower and he perfumes himself. They give him a set of clean white clothes. It isn't likely he would go back in the cesspool again. And they use that as an example of escaping from this world and going to a better dimension. Now, the Mahayana takes just the opposite view, that if a person is a great being, is awakened, and the goal would be to enter back into the cesspool for reasons of compassion. That would be the kind of ideal, very kind of long-term framework of incarnation after incarnation. But on the immediate side here, the reality of it is we know nothing of previous lives or future lives, or if that's even true or not. The reality of it is this is the only thing that we know, so we'd better take care of it. And I really believe that religions, the idea of Christianity with the rapture, and that God is going to come and take all the good people and put them on one side and all the bad people, and they're going to go to hell, and then he's going to restore the environment, and it's going to be heaven on earth. I've talked to many Christians that say, well, why should we do anything? Because it's going to happen very quickly, and God's going to do better than we can do. We can't do much about it. So there might be some very serious hurdles in religious dogma that need to be kind of overcome for those realities to, for the situation we're in to be remedied through a religious institution. I think the Mahayana, the Dalai Lama is an amazing ambassador of a human being, and that he can come out and make a statement like that is really going to affect the Western students that are in that teaching are going to take note of that. But I don't think we should underestimate the power that the Dalai Lama has over influencing all kinds of individuals. My wife's mother, who's a Catholic, just think Dalai Lama is just fantastic. Many people are that way. Seems to transcend, in a sense, really he isn't just Buddhist. He's something more than that. He's a very compassionate being. So his word has a lot of importance behind it. As I say, because it's a religious institution, we don't have the actual. The institution doesn't have the science, but the individuals who are involved in the unfolding can, in the West especially, are scientists, so that somehow we're going to have a teaching that incorporates both the inner and the outer. It just has to go that way. And science is a very important aspect of a new kind of. The teachings have always been quite adaptable, the Buddhist teachings. So it's just a matter of adapting to the next situation. And the environment is there, and we have the science. It's a challenge, but it's also quite exciting to see what can be done. Look at Sweden. Canada has 16% renewable resources. We're using 16% renewable resources for generating our power and heating our homes and driving our cars. And they haven't been able to break into that 17%. Keeps almost getting there. Most environmentalists say we should be actually doing 1% a year. But they just can't seem to do it. Sweden, on the other hand, is at 60% renewable resources. And we're sitting at 16%. So there, aside from religious leaders, there are, we'll say, the Scandinavian countries are remarkably good examples of what can be done to solve the present problems that we have. But that requires we have to educate ourselves. You have to know what has been done. It's very important to know what has been done and to look at those examples and then come back and form groups of people, and you have to get active.
Be in the world.
Well, the one thing is an example of how to actually cut down on the use of petrochemicals in your home and in your environment personally, but we also have to get together in groups and begin to study this more carefully, what can be done in a practical way quickly to cut down on the use of petrochemicals, to cut down on the use of the concentration of natural resources from the Earth's crust into our local environment. That is lead, cadmium, zinc, lots of heavy metals that don't break down. Once they come into our environment, they're there forever. And we're bringing them in from all over the Earth's crust, locked in packets, protective packets, breaking them open, bringing them in, and bringing them into the environment we live in, and they're highly poisonous. Secondly, we have to be more careful with what we dispose of in our environment, like the feces, the idea of driving around with these cars spewing out toxins in the environment is not responsible. So we just simply cannot increase the amount of human waste and that we create in the environment. Like I was driving the other day down and I saw the black on the snow about 3 weeks ago, and somebody was saying it's from car exhaust, and I said, well, 500 tons of rubber a year are being put into the atmosphere in Winnipeg. 500 tons of rubber a year from car tire wear. We don't even think about it. All your curtains and your upholstery are coated with a fireproof substance. Your government building, all the wood is soaked in fireproof retardant. All your curtains, your upholstery, the fireproofing agent that they use is highly, highly toxic and incredibly damaging to the brain and nervous system. And it has this amazing ability that when it hits liquid from the dump, it just skyrockets. It just like catapults itself rapidly through the entire water system. And we really need to start educating ourselves on the horrors. But then to balance it off, we have to look at what has been done and what can be done. Okay? And we can't also degrade our natural environments that are surrounding our cities. We have to restore wildlife lands, or marshy lands. Have to take much better care and not develop on the shores of lakes. I mean, it's insane, your water supply, that they should actually be putting cottages on the lake where your water comes from. And what are you thinking? I mean, I'm surprised somebody hasn't done something about it. I know it's a difficult thing that it's in Ontario, but there should be some dialogue about this, like that sort of development. You can't just rely on politicians to make decisions. It's the citizens that elect the politicians that have to educate themselves and take some action. I can't see any other way. Education, 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 and get organized and educate yourself. Get together, make videos, get information out there, and really start working on these issues.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. So this all seems really obvious, I think, to most people in the room, that we have to start taking care of the environment. And as far as looking at the history of human beings and societies that have gone extinct by wrecking their environments, do you have you reflected or been able to sort of see what the main weak link that seems to occur in the human condition? Is there a way that you can see that we might overcome it, a particular practice, whether it's insight or anything particular, that what is it that keeps us in that recurring cycle of destruction, that seems to follow us from Easter Island to Mayan
Yeah.
culture.
The cedars of Lebanon used to be giant cedars, but they cut them down to bring them to Egypt and building. And I think the Sahara Desert was actually forested at one point and was deforested. I mean, in North Thailand, in Thailand, to say they cut down the trees, and now they're having huge floods because they didn't realize that, say, a large leafy tree puts out about 2,000 gallons of vapor of water in the form of vapor a day. And that when you have all these trees, it formed a wall, actually a physical barrier, an invisible barrier of vapor barriers that kept the monsoons from going inland. So they cut down the trees, there's no root structure, and the monsoons come inland. And I was there visiting areas I used to live in that were rainforests. I didn't even think I was in the right location. They're just stripped down, and there were these cuts in the side of the hills that from the erosion, because it's like a hard-packed clay and small pieces of rock that were like 20 feet deep, about this wide. 20 feet, just completely. You couldn't even walk there. It was absolutely treacherous. So when you see this thing happening like that, no, I asked the local people, and the monks, they were fine with this. They had no problem. The local people that were falling the trees were getting paid 50 cents a tree. And it was one of the only sources of income they had. Now, 50 cents is equal to 12 baht. And the ordinary wages for labor at that time was 4 baht a day. So they could fall a tree and make, in their sense, pretty good money. Well, so greed looks like to be the driving force in our present situation. And I would say the idea of not understanding the repercussions of your actions, in the sense of not being educated, because many of the problems that we have are quite invisible to us just on an ordinary level. And I was talking to young people from Alberta, they, about 20 years old, and they were saying, I can't see any problems with the tar sands. I can't see any problem with the environment. Well, of course not. There's been no chance to see anything different. They are born into this change already, and of course to them there's no comparison. Like I've had quite a few years now, and traveling around the world, you actually can see how the environment has changed. Like you drive into Mexico City from the south, and you can tell when you're getting closer, they've got this flat kind of scrub brush things, and you start to notice plastic bags, and by the time you get within about 10 kilometers of Mexico City, as far as you can see in every direction there's nothing but plastic bags blowing in the wind. It's 100%, every tree is completely covered with it. And then you go and swimming in the ocean, they say, look at the beautiful coral, and I went in there and all it was is plastic bags flowing back and forth in there. And so the beach was completely filled with plastic bags and pieces of plastic toys. I mean, in Bangkok, there was so much plastic because they used to use palm leaves to wrap the food with. Now they've switched over to plastic bags, and they still throw them on the side of the road. Monsoon comes, and it washes it into the river. During that period, the birds are walking across the water. There's so much plastic in the river. It's solid. Millions and millions of bags. Like 3% of our oil products are used for plastic bags. 3% of the total production of petrochemicals are used for plastic bags. And it's a very easy solution. You just have to implement, instead of downstream technology, upstream technology. You can do both. In other words, downstream is you take the plastic bags and you recycle them. Upstream technology is you don't use them in the first place. And the idea that, I think, that another thing is that as far as the problem is not an isolated problem in Canada or Winnipeg, it's a world problem. So you can't really point your finger at China or India and say, well, they're going to really cause a lot of problems, or say Africa where they're burning, slash and burn for agriculture. If the people's basic needs are not met, then we have to meet everyone's basic needs in order to solve the problem on a world level. We can't no longer have 80% of the world's wealth held in the hands of 20% of the world's population. That traditionally caused wars. And it's well recorded that difference in wealth is a cause for war. So we could expect more and more people, as they want and see what we have, to be upset with the fact that we have this amount and they have nothing. We have to meet the needs on the world level. So it's very, very complex, but we have Sweden as a great model to look at. Other places around the world, individual kind of areas and cities have done wonders, but Sweden as a whole has really come on board with the sustainability principles and developed a really good kind of checklists and manuals for implementing sustainability in communities.